Welcome back to Beagle Eye Visions. We're on episode number 51 of the CubbyWhole podcast. Seeing the Seven should prove to be another very knowledgeable episode. I love this pod. This is one of the best podcasts out there. What on earth is happening? CubbyWhole podcast, The Wizard Factory. These are Wake the Dead podcast. These are some of the best out there on the internet ever. This is a very long episode. Got some Irish crickets in there. Very long episode. So, Morris the Kid wants me to grind right after this, so I gotta get to it. We're gonna grind Apex and Fortnite after this, get some dubs, and so we're gonna grind some Fallout, and I guess I'm gonna get some more materials for my settlement and try to make my settlement 100%. All right. Thank you for choosing Beagle Eye Vision for your entertainment. Let's get it.
And that's one of the things about religion that we have to remember when we're talking about that makes it such a hot topic issue is because we're talking about law. Who gets to be God? Who gets to be God's deputies? Who is the Most High? Who is the divine authority? It's all about the claim to the Most High. The only way that somebody can be higher than us is if we give away our power. Because there's nobody, we're all equal. But we're not equal in our knowledge, so ultimately I think it does have to be a hierarchy, but it has to be a cooperative hierarchy like a bee colony. It's about what our value system is, what we care about.
Hello, Hive Mind. Hello, all. Hello, whole universe. Today is November the 9th, 2021. I'm your host, Nate Cap. Welcome to the 51st CubbyWhole podcast, where important topics are unveiled, discussed, and tested. The website for this show is CubbyWhole.com. That's CubbyWhole.com. You can also listen to this podcast on Spotify, Apple, TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, Minds.com, Amazon Music, Odyssey, YouTube, and much more. Today I'm going to introduce and break down much of the Fellowcraft degree, including the pillars on the porch, the spiral staircase, natural law, and I will be covering the G, the capital letter G between the square and compass. And if you are already initiated into the mysteries of Freemasonry and you already know about the capital letter G, I think you will definitely find value in the correlations that I have shared towards the end of the show regarding this symbol. So if you can make it all the way through the show and really hear what I'm saying, I think you will find much value there, okay? So if you made it this far in the show, in these shows, okay, I'm assuming you're ready to pass on over to the winding stairs in the second degree, okay? So it's going to be another jam-packed show with lots of very interesting breakdowns, and I'm hoping that you've listened to these shows in order up until this one. It's not going to do anybody any good who gets here and has not listened to these shows, especially regarding Freemasonry, okay? On the last show, number 50, I gave a bit of a breakdown regarding the sacred pillars, the sacred feminine and sacred masculine pillars. And I also talked about the 3 Eastern lights within the entered apprentice tracing board, the first degree tracing board, okay? I also uncovered the importance of recognizing encrypted Masonic symbols in language, how letters and numbers are mostly Masonic in their origins, which means that we must be open to encrypted messages within our languages, okay? Especially when dealing with Freemasonry, because we have to understand that the oldest mystery tradition is Freemasonry, and it's been around for hundreds of thousands of years, and it is definitely an undertone in the letters and numbers that we use in our language. So it's really important that we pay attention to the sciences of esoteric Freemasonry in order to understand our language better, okay? Now, I also gave a short little allegory of the treasure chest, which has to do with the entered apprentice and you being the captain who is using this map of the self in order to find your treasure within your chest, which is your heart, which is your care, okay? And I also put a finer point on the meaning of the trestle board being the place that we trace upon, which is what we use as a easel in order to trace out our sciences of self, okay? And I got into a lot of what the first degree tracing board is all about on its right side, where it's on its south side, which is when I introduced the importance of the capital letter E as a symbol in regards to that tracing board, okay? Now, there was some other symbolism I covered, but if you missed it, I definitely recommend going back and listening to that show, okay? It's really a bad idea to listen to these shows, and this show especially, if you're not all caught up on the other shows prior, okay? You'll only be confused starting here, okay? Trust me. Now, what has to be really realized is it can truly be an amazing personal experience regarding the knowledge in these recent shows only if you have the necessary prerequisites, okay? The degrees of esoteric Freemasonry are a progression. They're a beautiful progression of the soul. They're a beautiful scientific progression of the soul. It's a symbolic spiritual journey towards the unfoldment of the soul. That's what it's all about. So to arrive at this type of knowledge means you, the serious student, is wanting the truth of who I am, or who am I, and why I am here. The truth of you and why you are here, and what this means, what this whole world is. So before I take us into the fellowcraft degree, I just want to say a few things and share some other interesting tracing board images regarding the first degree that I feel we should at least familiarize ourselves with. So, which I'm going to share with you here just in a few minutes, okay? So the first thing that I want to mention is I know some are a little confused to why I started talking about allegories, but haven't really broke any of them down yet. Well, what I said in those shows where I introduced allegory, I believe I said something to the effect that if we truly want to understand allegory and the deeper psychological aspects of allegory, then we need to understand a great deal of the Masonic science and degrees from the tracing boards, especially the first three, right? And that's what I'm doing right now. And once I believe I've covered enough of these degrees in this science, then Brandon and I will be doing some allegorical breakdowns of movies especially, okay? And, maybe after I get done with the second degree, maybe I'll take a little break between the degrees and I will do a little bit of a breakdown. Maybe I'll have Brandon come on and we'll do a breakdown of a movie or do some story breakdowns. But we'll see, okay? Another thing that I feel is important to respond to is I noticed that people are a little confused when I use the term initiate, because I've mentioned that you're now initiated into the mystery tradition if you've made it this far into the show. But if anyone has begun this podcast, they're automatically initiated in some way. Now, obviously, I'm not saying anyone's initiated into any group or gang or cult or religion, okay? Not at all. So, initiation, if you're not familiar with what it means, especially being initiated into the mysteries, it just simply means to enter or begin. Okay? That's it. You've begun your journey. You've entered the inner temple. That's it. So, the entered apprentice degree symbolically represents being initiated into the mysteries. But if you've listened to this information shared on this show, you are literally initiated into what you've heard. You're initiated. And there's nothing bad or evil about that. It's actually quite the opposite of that, especially with regards to anything about the self, the sciences of the self. To not be initiated, to willfully not be initiated is not a good thing, okay? That's ignorance. That's willful ignorance. And that can never be a good thing. Okay? Now, if you go to the podcast section on the CubbyWhole website under the show number 51, you'll see that I have shared some other tracing boards in the slides section, okay? And there's 7 of them. There should be 7 of them. And 6 of those 7 are more of the modern versions. But the one that you see that says Nebra Sky Disk, the circular shaped one, that's really old. This Nebra Sky Disk is supposedly over 3,600 years old. I'll be definitely sharing more information on that disk in future shows, but I refer to the Nebra Sky Disk as the feminine expression of Solomon's Temple, okay? But it's the same science either way. It's the same principles as the modern tracing boards, for the most part. Now, let's make sure to follow along with these slides for today's show, okay? And I just want to be very, very clear that if we truly want to learn these mysteries deeper, then we really need to be serious in listening to the information being presented on this show while looking at the images, okay? That's how we really get way more out of what's being shared, okay? It's so important to understand that when there is knowledge being presented and there's an image to look at, then what happens is the information starts to become clear. It's when you have the knowledge in the image, you are able to put things together faster and more efficient because the information is already within you. So hearing the information, so hearing the knowledge that I'm presenting, and then seeing the imagery, the symbols, it starts to resonate with each other. You're able to see what it's really saying deeper, you know? That's why they say a picture is worth 1,000 words, because a picture is something that can hold the knowledge. That's why the tracing boards are what holds knowledge. So when we arrive to the tracing board with enough knowledge, then the information that is already in the tracing boards becomes more evident. It starts to resonate with you. It starts to help you understand what these boards hold as the science that is within us, okay? Because it's about understanding the science of self. So having the image, having the knowledge is very important, especially at the same time. Now, let's go ahead and dive into the second degree, okay? Or walk in or fly in, however you want to approach this inner structure of the self, this science of the self. Okay, so I hope everybody has their imaginations, their imagine at ions, okay? Because that's what's really going to be needed here to help us understand this information on a deeper level. We need our imagination's eye on. You know, conscious, critical thought with knowledge and deep observation of the self. That's what needs to be on. Now I'm going to start with the slide of a quote by Gary Lockman, who wrote the book, The Lost Knowledge of the Imagination. He said, "True imagination has a transformative power. It can alchemically transmute information from the senses into symbols to be deciphered or language to be translated. In essence, it turns facts into meaning by linking parts into wholes. It does not construct something unreal. That is the business of fantasy, but unveils the hidden reality." I love that quote. And that's what this is all about. That's what all these degrees of esoteric Freemasonry are all about. These degrees are here to unveil the hidden reality of self, okay? And the imagination is our greatest tool to do that with, especially for this lifelong unfoldment of the soul. Right? Now, as we enter the Fellowcraft degree of Esoteric Freemasonry, I want to make sure you're following along with the slides, and we're on the slide with the two golden looking pillars, which are actually hollow brass pillars, but it's the one with the two initiates on the spiral staircase leading up to the temple. Okay, this is the area known as the Porch of Solomon's Temple. And by the way, this is another Josiah Bowring painting. Okay? Now, symbolically, this is where the seeker of truth arrives. Okay, this is where the seeker knows that they've learned quite a bit about life, but don't really have it all figured out. You know, the student knows that they're not self-omniscient. They're not all-knowing. And they know that there's much more knowledge and truth to be discovered. This is where the student really begins to gain a truer hunger for truth, to really put truth first, really, to be so hungry for truth that almost nothing else matters. And this is the degree of growth and spiritual manhood, okay? It's about addressing the mind. So the entered apprentice is about encompassing the body, and then the Fellowcraft is about addressing the mind. And then the third degree, the Master Mason degree, is about conferring the central mystery of all Freemasonry. And they're all three about perfecting the soul. Okay? So this tracing board is representative of the ending of the apprenticeship. And that doesn't mean leaving anything behind from the entered apprentice degree. This is about becoming a fellow of the craft. Okay? And fellow can also mean follow, as in follow the masters of the craft. And obviously, not to be a follower in the sense of blind faith or taking orders, but it's about realizing that there's value in the works of the master builders, you know, that really needs to be learned from and built upon. It's about standing on the shoulders of giants, and obviously not literal ones. But the fellow also is about being bound in mutual trust. And this mutual trust comes from the meeting on the level, you know, being principled, being aligned to the laws of nature. Okay, a fellow craft is a fellow spiritual workman, and it's about being a companion to other builders, other spiritual builders. So like I said, this degree symbolizes adulthood, and this is where the student accepts and realizes personal responsibility within the full life here on Earth. This is the stage where one morally builds on the square to be able to improve not only themselves, but also the surrounding society that they live in, okay? So the more improvement within, the more improvement without. We're each part of a whole. So the more we each heal or, you know, evolve within ourselves, the more the whole of the people of this whole world becomes healed and evolved. Right? Now, within the Fellowcraft degree, within the Fellowcraft tracing board, the pillars that we see here on the porch are known as Jachin and Boaz, like the first degree. They're at the entrance of the temple that the student must pass through in order to advance into the higher spiritual degrees, right? And entering into the temple of Solomon is symbolically about entering the house of God or the house of the Creator. And the only reason for entering is to come into the presence of the Creator. So if there isn't a desire to know the artist or architect who designed this whole universe, you know, this whole grand lodge, then it really won't help to go beyond this porch, this point, right? Now, spiritually, no evolution can truly take place past this point if the student isn't ready for the responsibility that awaits there. Okay? Now, this responsibility that I'm talking about is the responsibility of individual behavior. You know, the true responsibility of having the knowledge and understanding of objective morality and then acting on it. Now I'm going to explain this much further with the symbols, okay? And we are looking at the pillar of Jachin on the left in this tracing board. This is the pillar that supports the celestial sphere with the constellation maps and charts. The sphere that's all netted up, okay? On the chapiter, the capital of the pillar. This celestial sphere symbolizes natural law, okay? The law that governs human behavior. And the pillar of Boaz that we see with the terrestrial sphere, the earth globe within the netting, this represents free will, the ability to choose right action over wrong action. Now remember, the Entered Apprentice is an earthly directional map of morality, where we can choose, you know, to go west or east, you know, wrong or right.
Thank you so much.
And this is the truth that these pillars symbolize to the Fellowcraft. And it's important to remember it's not enough to be within this presence of the Creator when we arrive here, right? But the student must truly desire to be there through their personal free will choice, but to not forget that it has to be a choice that's aligned in natural law. And this is what we really must truly understand before advancing towards the spiral staircase. The fellowcraft initiate has to know and understand, and more importantly, be able to demonstrate a basic understanding of natural law, or you can call it universal law, or the law of one, or karmic law, or just simply the capital L law, however you want to call this intelligent, non-man-made law that governs human behavior. Nobody can truly pass in through the pillars, these celestial and terrestrial pillars of the porch and up the spiral staircase without the understanding of objective morality. Each one of us has to know definitively that a right is an action that does not initiate harm onto others, other sentient beings. That a right is based in truth. It's correct. And then we have to understand what opposes that, which is a wrong. And a wrong is an action that does initiate harm onto others. A wrong is not based in truth. A wrong is incorrect. And unfortunately, most who make it to this point aren't honest with themselves and act like they understand this science and think that they can truly advance past this point with dishonesty. And it's simply not the case because, people fool themselves at this point way too often, and it only truly causes stagnation. We can't truly understand the mysteries and pass this degree without the knowledge and understanding of natural law. It's not possible. Now, I'm not deferring anyone listening to just, stop listening to the show here if you don't know or understand natural law. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying that knowledge of natural law is a requirement to be able to pass this point, to be spiritually passed before ascending the staircase into the middle chamber. That's it. The knowledge and understanding of natural law is the key that we need in order to, go forward in this reality of what this tracing board means, okay? The science that's embedded within it that helps us understand ourselves, that helps us understand this life, okay? The student is here for the advancement of self, right? So dishonesty is only cheating the self. But honesty is admitting that more work needs to be done, and that's where growth continues, okay? And this science is definitely not about being better than anyone. It's about becoming and evolving into a better and a more moral human being, and then collectively helping evolve the human species by evolving the self. That's what it's about. Now, I'm highly encouraging everyone listening to keep moving forward, to really know where this is all going, okay? But I'm just giving a reminder, I'm giving a fellow warning that natural law is the requirement here, or else the student won't be spiritually prepared for what comes next, which is something I'm going to get into and demonstrate here a little shortly, okay?
Here's Snoopy in the background.
See, we have to understand that we all know this information deep down, okay? But it's the knowledge of that information that we observe and critically and logically examine that unlocks the information within. And that helps us understand that information in a way that we can communicate with ourselves and others and demonstrate this information to others, to help the world. So not having the proper understanding of natural law is why there's so much suffering going on in the self, and especially the world. And that's another thing that is definitely required before taking a step up that spiral staircase, and that is the student must realize that there's suffering going on in others. The student must realize that as there is any suffering in others, then there is suffering taking place. So as the saying goes, as one suffers, all suffer. The realization of suffering in others is really truly about realizing the connected universe. And then realizing that as one heals from the suffering in the self, the whole world heals. Okay? That's really, really deeply important to understand because we're all connected. Now, let's move forward to the spiral staircase. And this is where we further our knowledge of natural law. I mean, all 3 degrees are about furthering our knowledge and understanding of natural law, but the steps in the spiral staircase, these steps help us approach natural law further in the sciences. They help us understand these sciences deeper, okay? Now, these stairs can be called the winding staircase, or they can be called the spiral staircase. But both names are very important to know and keep in mind. If you notice, there are 2 initiates standing on the stairs in this particular tracing board. There's one at the bottom wearing a plum roll as a pendant around his neck, which means you as the student who is finding your care, who understands objective morality while keeping your emotions upright, is ready to go further inward. It's about keeping emotions in check to be able to listen to the instructions, to be able to receive the instructions we don't want to hear, we don't want to receive. And this behavior begins to erect the legendary spiral staircase. You know, the inner journey, the allegorical climb up the mountain. And the initiate standing at the top of the stairs with the level around his neck as a pendant, this initiate represents being level with or aligning to natural law before advancing into the temple and or the middle chamber. And this is all part of understanding the allegory of the spiral staircase. Now, looking at the winding spiral staircase slide, the allegory regarding this spiral staircase is first about faith. Faith of what's to come as we continue on this path. And when I say faith, I'm not talking about belief or blind faith in anything exterior or religious. I'm talking about knowing and understanding natural law and truly having faith in ourselves to be able to take on whatever unfolds before us or in front of us. So when thinking of going up a winding staircase, you can only see a few steps ahead, right? We can't really see what's around the bend, right? We can't really know the future or what, may come around that bend. But we know that our faith in ourselves, we know that the faith that we have and our spiritual armor and intuition that we have, we know that these things will help us take on whatever life throws out in front of us, right? It's about the fact that the path of life really isn't straight. It's more of an unfoldment. And that's what the spiral or winding staircase does. It unfolds before us. So when thinking about the entered apprentice tracing board, the ladder, there's no faith needed in climbing that ladder, right? Where the student can basically visualize the top and be, constantly inspired by the information while ascending rung after rung, because you can see where you're going. So you don't need faith. So that's why this tracing board really is all about faith.
Go talk to Dreff.
But as we advance in the steps of spiritual evolution, the temptation to, look or go back west towards the pavement, towards the ground, this becomes less, right? Our temptation to want to go back to our base desires and fantasies becomes less. And why is that?
Sure.
It's because we start to care more. We start to care for truth. The heart becomes more sensitized to reality. And this is why we become more alive within. Our kundalini is more activated. We're able to start to truly connect with all of our chakras, our energies, our inward energies are becoming more activated. Our pineal gland is starting to actually light up, and we are able to be more energized because we truly care.
Gonna buy something?
And it's about a continual progress forward in consciousness,
No.
right?
Buy 'em or not?
There's an advancement from the lower to the higher state, from the lower state to the higher state, from the darkness of the self to the light, from death to life, from the tomb to the rays of light, from ignorance to wisdom, and from the error of the mind to truth. The student is always ascending and never stationary and never goes back. That's the principle of being the student of life. And each step of the spiral staircase gains illumination to the knowledge of more elevated instruction from the universe and from the contemplation of knowledge. I think of it like a lighthouse, okay? In the sense that the word lighthouse has both the words house and light in it, right? So it's a house or temple, right? It's a pillar. And it also has a spiral staircase. It has a 360-degree rotating light, like the all-seeing eye. It's about being able to see in all directions, okay? The light. And it looks out over the distance for a captain that needs a guiding light. And that captain is you. It's me. It's each one of us in search for light or truth on our journey. So that is a very powerful allegory regarding the lighthouse. The lighthouse is one of those beautiful physical archetypes that actually holds an allegory of the spiritual self. Now, let's look at the words spiral and winding. These words are very, very important to understand, okay? The word spiral comes from the medieval Latin spiralis, meaning winding around a fixed center, coiling. like a spiral, right? Now, spiral can also translate to spire, which means spiral. And spire is the compound noun of spiritual, which is combined with the word ritual, which is the spire ritual. And that's what the spiral ritual of the staircase is all about. It's the spiritual or spire ritual within. Okay? This spiral staircase is the spire ritual. True spirituality is about the science of morality and the discovery of dogma, right? And that's what these stairs are. This symbolic staircase is the spiritual journey within, and to recognize and overcome dogma. Now think of where the spiral staircase ends. It ends at the Most High, symbolically. And where is this Most High? This is something that we've talked about on past shows, but I'll reveal more about it here a little bit shortly, because there's more connection that comes with understanding this spiral staircase. Lots more. But first, we need to understand the winding stairs, okay? So looking at the winding staircase 357 image. Now, the word winding has a few encrypted meanings when it comes to this staircase. Winding means to turn or to twist, right? To wind things means to wind things together, which means to bind them, like binding our soul back to source or natural law, right? And then there's wind or twist, like DNA, like a DNA strand, right? To raise energy or to calm energy means to wind up or to wind down. So when we're wound up or we wind up, we raise energy. And when we wind down, we're calming energy. So think of this in terms of the spiral staircase, okay? So wind can also be like wind, okay? Because the spelling is the same. They're both spelled the same, but they're pronounced differently, which makes them heteronyms. So when we think of wind, we think of wind like blowing wind, or to get wind of, meaning to receive a message of some kind in such a way. There's also wind as in the motion of air. So like a tornado is a cyclone or vortex. It's spiral-like in its shape, right? It also lifts things from the ground up. It's winding wind. Now, both spiral and winding are both equally important as symbols in this fellowcraft degree, okay? Spiral is really important when thinking of something like the Fibonacci sequence. And winding is important because it allows the student to understand the odd numbers of steps a lot easier when they're traced out and not in a spiral shape, right? So when looking at a spiral staircase, it can be very difficult to convey or express the symbols and words on each step, you know, in a way that's easy for us to be able to see in a winding staircase image, right? So these tracing boards are made of geometry. They're made of geometry that we can use to be able to curiously trace nature through her various windings. So looking at the winding staircase image, we see that the first three steps are corresponding to the first 3 degrees: entered, passed, and raised. entered apprentice, fellow craft, and master mason. The tools of each step are the square, level, and plumb rule tools, okay? The square symbolizes morality and truthfulness and honesty, okay? It's the tool used to build stable and upright walls in our internal temple. It's what helps us keep our behavior true and accurate. And I know that I've already stated these tools already, but it's important to understand them on these steps, these first 3 steps, okay? So the level that we see, this level is about being the symbol of equality under natural law, which is about treating each step in life with care. And then the plumb rule is about being upright in our intentions and keeping our emotions upright and in check. So the square teaches morality, the level teaches equality under natural law, and the plumb rule teaches uprightness of life in our actions. And with these tools, we learn the faculty of judgment and learn to discern what is valuable, what is true, and what is real. Now we're going to move to the 5 steps in the middle, the 5 senses, okay? It's important to note that the number 3 is associated with the entered apprentice, and the number 5 is associated with the fellow craft. So 5 is in the middle between 3 and 7, and the fellow craft is between the entered apprentice and the master mason degrees, okay? That's really important to understand because it's in the middle. And these 5 steps that we see are the 5 senses, which are seeing, hearing, smelling, feeling, and tasting, which the student must learn very deeply and then ascend past and move beyond, okay? These 5 senses are important keys that we must realize with the proper application of analogy where there will then be a higher spiritual transmutation from the material realm to the spiritual. These sense perceptions are governed by the emotional energies that construct the expression of the power of the fellow craft, because the fellow craft is about emotion and compassion and heart. It's the area of the middle and balance, okay? So these faculties assist the student in experiencing and understanding the world around them. They help us understand our experience of the world in a way where our brains can interpret our surroundings and make sense of all that we experience. These 5 senses, along with the reasoning of our minds, help us to receive data and produce feedback to our surroundings, okay? Our 5 senses are the bridge between the known of the material world and the unknown of the spiritual world. And these 5 senses are like our body's own graphic user interface within reality. And just like a computer, the graphic user interface is only part of the equation, right? The graphic user interface is how the person interacts with the whole of the computer and is able to navigate usage of the machine, of the computer, right? This is what our 5 senses are for within our body, okay? So as materialism has a stronghold on our bodies and 5 senses, it then has a stronghold of our minds. And there is much more to the world and universe that can't be understood by these 5 senses. So the student of the craft is instructed to explore beyond and move past these five senses, but to realize that these five senses are very important that we master. Okay, because that's what it's about. It's about mastering the senses. We have to realize that these senses are our limited earthly senses. They are the physical world senses. And it's here that we realize that the belief in these five senses as the end all be all, or that we're solely limited to these senses and can't see any further in reality, this is where we come to realize the dogma and illusion of the five sense perception of reality. Because reality is beyond what we can see and feel and smell and hear and taste. Just as we can't see gravity. You know, we can't hear a dog whistle. Does that mean that they don't exist? No. We can't see natural law, right? But we can know that it operates just by understanding its effects and the causes of those effects, right? It's about understanding causality. These winding stairs are really all about how we logically come to deeply understanding natural law, how we test it, how we measure it, how we align with it, and why it is the solution to ending the slavery within. And then, of course, by ending slavery within, we manifest that end outwardly into the world. Now, the next set of steps, the next odd set of steps, are 7, which are made of the trivium and the quadrivium. These are the 7 liberal arts. And Brandon and I covered these liberal arts in the first 2 shows. And these 7 liberal arts are the scientific methods that we learn to think with, especially scientifically. So first 3 and then 4. And this science is here to challenge our beliefs, okay? To critically learn how to discern truth from falsehood and find the inaccuracies and dogmas in life, and really anything, especially anything to do with man's authority. Now, I want to share just a small anecdote of my journey into understanding natural law. And that is, when I was learning natural law, I had also just started to learn these liberal arts. And I mean, I just ripped through natural law. I tore it apart. I tried to, anyway. I tried to find any error or any dogma or any fallacy, because it was hard for me to see how there could be such thing as objective morality. You know, I could not understand that there was such thing as a law that governs human behavior. And I exhausted my research to the point where I started to actually come to an understanding that there really is an organic, intelligent, and inherent mechanized system that governs human behavior in the universe. And it's a system not made or caused by man. It's something that we each discover on our own. You know, it's not a made-up thing. It's something that we each can discover. And I realized that this law, this universal binding law, is something that can and is felt by all beings all human beings especially, regardless of their ignorance or knowledge of it. And it's something that can and is felt by all beings with the capacity to reason. It can really only be understood through each person's own personal discovery. But it's a discovery that's based in science. It's based in science that, when understood by the individual, by the student, then they are able to meet on the level. We're all able to meet on the level in nature when we have an understanding of this science and live by it. That's what the level is all about. Okay? I'm not going to go into too much depth with the trivium and quadrivium methods, okay? But if you need more thorough understanding, there's a couple of really awesome hardback books that I recommend, which is the classic liberal arts of trivium, grammar, logic, and rhetoric, and the classic liberal arts of quadrivium, number, geometry, music, and cosmology. Each of these books are really, really great references. And you can also, if you don't want to read, you can also go back to the first shows of this podcast, and you can listen there to learn about these methods, these science methods. Or you can do both, which I actually recommend the most. So I'm just going to give a short refresher of the trivium and quadrivium. So we have the trivium, which consists of the three arts of language that pertain to the mind, which are grammar, logic, and rhetoric, and in that order. This is the classical trivium method, okay? In classical Latin, the trivium meant where three roads meet. And the quadrivium meant where four roads meet. So threefold path and fourfold path, okay? It's about truth discovery. So starting with the trivium and the first step of the seven, which is grammar, this is about assembling knowledge. It's about gathering data from an eclectic array of sources while looking at all sides without any prejudgment, okay? And then the second step, which is logic, this is about the art of thinking and pondering and ruminating. It's the filtration or processing stage towards understanding.
All right, so that's a good. We're at the halfway mark of episode number 51 of the CubbyWhole podcast. Thanks again if you made it this far. You're an absolute legend. If you have made it this far on the journey of studying this type of knowledge. Unfortunately, the PS5 is going to kick me off because we're almost at an hour. But luckily, this episode it's split directly in the middle, so we'll be able to continue on next time, and there will be no cutoffs. Wow, again, that was a very dense episode. I didn't realize how dense episode 49, 50, and 51 are. These are very intense episodes, and I highly recommend you have to watch these episodes with the slides in your own time. I mean, watch it with the grinding, you know what I mean? But, you learn a lot more when you watch them with the slides. I know I did, personally. When I started watching these episodes with the slides, I learned so much more. And you don't know until you do it. It's kind of weird. It's one of those things. It's a whole thing, like we say in Crazy Life Stories. So thanks again if you made it this far. Stay tuned and stay golden. We will wrap this episode up on the next episode. Thanks again.